Hi, this is Catherine Moore or Kay Moore. I am back on Exposing a Monster podcast. One of the things that popped into my mind that I did want to say and clarify, because I am sure that there are people that are wondering, why is she talking about this? Why doesn't she just let it go? And some people probably think, well, gosh, I would be too embarrassed to talk about that. How can she talk about that? That's so humiliating. And here's the thing. It is my way of giving the middle finger to people that were involved in it, because trust me, there were many people involved. And a lot of those people were in the Texas Annual Conference administration. And so it's my story to tell, and I'm going to tell it. And the other thing is that back then I was exploited, and of course I didn't give consent, and nobody bothered to ask me, if I wanted all of those horrific things done to me. And my children have been affected by this, and I am going to cover that in later episodes. That is one of my motivating factors in why I am telling my story. I also want to empower other survivors and people that are thriving now, so that they know that they are not alone. And also, if I'm going to continue to be exploited, then it's going to be on my terms. It's not going to be on the terms of the Texas Annual Conference administration. It's not going to be on the terms of my parents because they're dead. It's not going to be on the terms of my ex-husband, Carl Edward Anthony, who is still abusing our two sons. And it is definitely not going to be on the terms of the Domestic Relations Office of Harris County. And it's also not going to be on the terms of the family court system in Harris County. If I'm going to be exploited, I'm going to exploit myself, and it's going to be on my terms. And it's not always fun. I don't like talking a lot. And so that is my purpose in doing this podcast. There are people in authoritative positions, especially in the Texas Annual Conference, who have gone to great lengths to keep me from talking about what happened to me in the United Methodist denomination and within the Texas Annual Conference administration. But that's too bad. And when I am dragged into a situation, and I am somebody who has been affected by an administration placing child molesters in the pulpit every Sunday in a United Methodist church, and I am affected by that, then I am going to talk about it. And it was those same people who told me I needed to face the abuse and face what happened to me. And so when I finally decided to take the bull by the horns, so to speak, then it was those same people who felt that I should address my abuse, but they wanted it to be on their terms. And on their terms meant not making them uncomfortable. And when I say them, I am talking about my extended family. I am talking about people in the United Methodist denomination. And I am proud of that. And this is the legacy that I will be leaving for my sons, because my sons will see that I had the courage to own what happened to me and make my healing my own and not anyone else's. No one else is going to take credit for what I have done to work on myself and heal. And if my story can do that for someone else, then I have accomplished what I was hoping for. I also take pride in having courage. One of the things that I am proud of is that no one, and I do mean absolutely no one, can call me a coward. And dealing with trauma requires sitting in discomfort. And I am so stubborn, and like my mother used to say, which she was right, at times I was as stubborn as a bull moose in a china closet. And I am. I am ready to, if I see a challenge, I am ready to take it on. And I don't care how uncomfortable it is going to be, especially if I am fed up, if I have had enough. And I will sit in the discomfort, and I won't just sit in it. I will roll around in the discomfort. I will deal with the trauma. And I will own it, because it will not own me. And that is how I have kept it from owning me, is by talking about it and sharing my story. I have had a podcast before, and it was mostly recorded conversations, which I'm still going to continue to do. And over the years, I recorded conversations, and when I went back and listened to those recorded conversations told a story. And I decided I needed another place to store those conversations, and so I started podcasting those conversations. And that podcast had actually reached 26 different countries. Now, this was on Anchor Podcast, and this was before Anchor, before Spotify bought out Anchor. And that I lost that podcast, so unfortunately there's still some podcasts from that was picked up by other platforms that are still out there and can be found under Catherine Anthony. And Catherine Anthony was my from my first marriage, and my name now has since changed to Catherine Moore. What I had spoken about the last episode, I believe, was when we lived in Omaha, Texas, and I was talking about the older ladies in the church who were my saving grace. Now, these ladies were not the ladies that showed me the love that my parents, the love and concern and compassion that my parents were not able to show me. This was not because they were a part of the United Methodist denomination. This was because they were compassionate human beings. It didn't matter what denomination they were in. It was because they were loving women who were put here on earth to make a difference. These were women who understood life and understood how important compassion towards any human being is and was at the time. These were ladies who saw that I needed love and made the conscious choice to love me even if I didn't feel worthy of their unconditional love. And I don't think it had anything to do with religion or the Bible or Jesus or God or the United Methodist denomination. I think it was because they were outstanding, wonderful, kind women that were in my life and could see that I needed their love and their guidance. And I am always going to be forever thankful to them. I did speak, the last one I spoke about was Helene Thigpen. And I remember Helene Thigpen talking in Sunday school class about her experience with working, I guess, I don't know if they call them, they have a specific name for it now, and it's like a death doula. And she kind of had that role in people's lives where she was there for people in their dying moments. And it's probably because she was such a kind and loving woman, and probably one of the strongest women I've ever known. And Helene Thigpen was a woman of grace and integrity. She carried herself well. She dressed well. And she always treated people with respect and kindness. And people wanted to treat her the same. She had a presence about her that attracted kindness and respect from other people. And I remember Thomas Thigpen, her husband, he was wonderful as well. And but he was more quiet. I wasn't around him as much as I was Helene Thigpen. And when I went to Pewitt School District, which was in Omaha, it was a consolidated school district with other towns like Marietta and Naples, Texas. I was in the school, I was in 5th, 6th, and 7th grade at Omaha. And my 5th grade year was a tough year because I was new at Omaha and at Pewitt. I was also in special education because I struggled with math. And there was a school counselor there named Alicia Hampton, Mrs. Hampton, and she looked out for me and took me under her wing. She took extra time in counseling me and checking on me to see if I was doing okay. And during my 5th grade year, I do remember my mother had cataract surgery that year, and I remember my mother having to have her gallbladder removed, and Ray and Jenny Ruth Thigpen had picked me up or something. I can't remember. They picked me up at the hospital and gave me a ride back home. And they helped me buy like a Santa gift that I was supposed to exchange at school, and they were slippers. And one of the girls named Passion had tricked me or conned me into giving her the slippers and cried. And I felt bad for her. Of course, at the time, I thought it was a big deal. I don't know. It's just one of those random things that I remember. And there was my father was at times inappropriate and touching me inappropriate, which I was not, I did not like, but I did not know how to, I didn't know what to do about it, and I didn't know if I tried to pull away from him, he would lay a guilt trip on me. And interesting enough, he would suggest that I thought that he was some kind of creep, which is interesting because he was. It was his way of gaslighting me, trying to guilt trip me so that I would feel responsible. And it worked. And probably my 6th grade year, I started having health issues and digestive issues, and my parents were having to take me to the ER because I couldn't keep anything down. And I was eventually admitted into the hospital. And the shame and the guilt that I felt, I had no idea why I felt so much shame and guilt. And really it was associated with the trauma that I had gone through in Amarillo. But I mean, I was too young to really connect the two together and have that aha moment. Oh, okay, so this is what's going on and this is how I need to address it. I mean, you can't really do that at the age of 10. You just don't have the skills. You don't have the coping mechanism. You don't have the insight, the consciousness to do that. And I remember Virginia Atkinson wanted to come and see me, and I cried. I was just so humiliated, and I didn't want her to come because I didn't want her to see me there in the hospital. It was vulnerable. I don't like vulnerability. At times I don't like vulnerability in the sense of letting people get close. I don't like vulnerability in the sense of getting attached to people. I'm okay with vulnerability in talking about what I went through. And the reason why I am okay with that is because that is a part of my healing and my recovery. Because when people are telling you that they think you need to deal with your abuse, it's because they're preying on your vulnerability. Where they think you are most vulnerable. And then when you are ready to deal with that vulnerability and go to that place of vulnerability to deal with your trauma and abuse, that is a threat to them. Because the reason why they're suggesting you deal with your trauma and abuse in the first place is because they haven't dealt with their own, and they haven't confronted their own vulnerability. And what they want is to prey on your vulnerability so that they don't have to look at their own. And once you've done that, there is no power in someone else telling you, oh, well, you have to deal with your trauma and abuse. Because 9 times out of 10, when they're telling you that, they haven't dealt with their own. And there was a conversation I had with a girl because, and it's amazing how when you're a kid, the things you think are a big deal, once you're in your 30s, even 20s, you realize it wasn't a big deal. And I remember a girl saying in band class that her parents were atheists, and because my father was a pastor, I thought that was a big deal. That was just shocking to me. And I had gossiped about it, and I felt bad. And so I had wrote her a letter. And my mother found the letter and shamed me for it. And so I just felt like an inch tall, and I had not done anything wrong. But my mother wanted to make it seem like I had. And what transpired while I was in the hospital during these gastrointestinal issues, basically what it was trauma that had just built up over the years from all of the abuse I had been through. But, of course, nobody could figure that out because there were too many people involved that had their head up their goddamn ass. And I was diagnosed. I went through all kinds of tests, upper GI, lower GI. They even did a barium enema on me, and that is horrific. And what I was diagnosed with was I had an ulcer. It was in my I'll just say I had an ulcer because I don't want to pronounce it wrong. And it was bleeding. I was on a liquid diet for about a week, and then I finally went home and went back to school. And all I heard were teachers shaming me. Oh, well, don't worry because you're going to cause yourself to have an ulcer. Don't worry. Well, what the fuck was I supposed to do? Hell, I went through so much goddamn trauma and abuse. I mean, after being drugged by my parents so that my father could sexually assault me, they intentionally made me ill from codeine to the point that I was lethargic and couldn't keep it down. Well, no wonder I would have a fucking ulcer years later. I mean, of course I would. But people didn't know that. I mean, people were dumb during the 80s. And I know that when teachers were telling me this, oh, don't worry too much, because that's why you got an ulcer. And I just felt so much shame. And before that, I remember I had like a stomach bug or something, a virus, and I was sick. I threw up on the bus that day, and I was just mortified because I am a control freak with that stuff. And the nurse, I was just sick, and I didn't get to the bathroom in time, and I threw up, and Nurse Hagen, Jenny Hagen, got on to me. And I remember that day, Mrs. Hampton came and checked on me. And I put on a brave face for her. because I was not about to be vulnerable for anybody. My motto was, don't let them see you sweat. You keep your shit together and you don't let them see you sweat. And you don't fall apart. And I remember Mrs. Hampton coming up to me, calling me out of class and talking to me in the hallway, and she knelt down where she could be eye to eye with me, because she was 5'7" and she was tall. And I really wanted to just break down and cry on her shoulder. And I didn't. Because I just could not let myself be that vulnerable. As horrible as I felt. And it was also her love that got me through those years. And around the time that I was in the 6th and 7th grade, I don't remember, it might have been after 6th grade. No, it was when I was in the 6th grade. My parents started going, because they had started back in Amarillo. I also forgot to mention this, because my parents and I were on the news in Amarillo. And the reason why we had been on the news in Amarillo is because even though my parents were drugging me so that I could be sexually assaulted at the time, they were attending classes so that they could become adoptive parents. Isn't that a load of shit? My father was a United Methodist minister employed by the Northwest Texas Conference in Amarillo, and my mother was drugging me so my father could sexually assault me, and they're attending classes in Amarillo to adopt a child. And we were on TV, and my parents were being interviewed. I mean, that's crazy. Who would think? Because you never know what goes on behind closed doors. And, you know, you can look at a painting on a wall, and if you took that painting off the wall and you look behind the painting, you don't see the paint, you don't see the color and the paint that you see on the other side. You see something completely different. And that is what abuse looks like. Everything can look wonderful on the outside, but once you get behind closed doors, it's a completely different world. Because my parents were nothing like how they portrayed themselves to the public in these small towns and in the churches. And my father was nothing like how he portrayed himself in the pulpit and in the church office with people in the churches in the United Methodist Church and in the Texas Conference. And so my parents had stopped those classes and started attending classes again to qualify to adopt a child. And they were attending classes in Northeast Texas, near Omaha, Texas. There was also a couple that I really thought highly of in Omaha, and it was John Lee and Novell Moore. I didn't really care for older men. I wasn't, and what I mean by that is I didn't care for anybody. I didn't want anybody. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't want anybody bothering me. There were only certain people that were really, like Helene Thigpen and Virginia Atkinson, that were really able to make a difference. And John Lee Moore did as well. There was one day when I was, I don't know, my dad and I were joking around, and my dad had gone in the church, and I don't know, at some point he came out. I thought he was still in the church. And so this was at Omaha, and I was banging on the window, and I thought he had locked me out, and I was banging on the window. I didn't realize the power of my own fist and how fragile the glass was. And when I was banging on it, I broke the glass, and I was just beside myself. I was devastated. I was sobbing, and I was crying in the fellowship hall, and I just felt horrible. And John Lee Moore fixed it. He repaired the window. And there were a few times I went over to John Lee Moore's house in Novell Moore. And John Lee Moore was a saint of a man. Just an angelic, kind, loving spirit. And I also struggled because I had a severe overbite, and I struggled with bullying. They would call me names like Bucktooth K and Beaver. And I've run out of time, and I will continue sharing about Omaha on the next episode. And I'm going to end this episode, and thank you for coming to my podcast, Exposing a Monster.